So where are we off to in this wee video then? We're off to the land of the rising sun, Japan. Home to all things anime, karate, and some of the most terrifying horror movies I've ever seen. I went through a lot of underwear. Thanks, Japan. It's also responsible for advancing the world in technology and car manufacturing. To be honest, I could talk all day about Japan, but we've not got the time for that. Hi folks, my name's Johnny. Welcome to The Oddest. This story is insane. It's got more twists than a chocolate curly whirly. Why that reference, you might ask? Because this story is all about the sweets. Or candy, if you're one of my American pals. In this case, we're going to check out a crazy crime wave that swept through Japan in the 80s. So, let's get into The Monster with 21 Faces. On the 18th of March, way back in 1984, in Osaka, a Japanese gentleman by the name of Katsuhisa Izaki was shattered after a long day at the office and decided to have a wee bath. Nothing beats a hot bubble bath with a wee glass of sake. About 9 PM, whilst he was relaxing, letting the bath bombs do their thing, he thought that he heard a sound coming up the stairs. No sooner had he realised this than the bathroom door burst open and two hooded men, armed with guns, stormed in and subsequently kidnapped Mr. Izaki right out of his bathtub. They never even let the man get dressed first. See, living next door to Izaki was his 70-year-old mother. Unbeknownst to him, whilst he was taking his bubble bath, the assailants broke into his mother's house, tied her up and took the key to get entry to Izaki's house. Once they got into his home, they subdued and tied up his 35-year-old wife and his 7-year-old daughter. His wife would ask why and offer the men any amount of money, to which they would tell her to be quiet and told her money is irrelevant. They then cut the phone lines before heading upstairs and abducting the man in the bathtub. They took the naked Izaki to a warehouse in Ibaraki, Osaka. See, Izaki was the head of a multinational corporation called Izaki Glyco, which manufactured and distributed food worldwide. They produced various candy products, dairy, ice cream, processed foods and baby formula. The very next day, a ransom letter was received for the attention of Izaki Glyco Company, in which they demanded 1 billion yen, which was just under $8 million, and 100 kilograms of gold. They wanted the ransom to be left at a specific time in a specific phone booth. Izaki soon found himself in an unknown location, in a warehouse somewhere in Osaka. 2 days later, he was able to get free of his constraints and bust through the warehouse door. He fled the scene and a short time later found 2 railroad employees and asked them for help and could he please contact the police. I was wondering if he had did this ninja escape still naked, but after doing my research, I found out that his kidnappers were kind enough to give him clothes. After being questioned by the police, Izaki wasn't much help. He couldn't identify his abductors, nor could he give any rise to the motives besides ransom. So obviously the kidnap for ransom plot was up in smoke. However, the people behind the heist were not done there. In fact, they were just getting started. They had sent another warning letter saying that if they didn't pay the ransom, they would poison Glyco products using cyanide poison. Just to prove that they were serious, they managed to gain entry to the grounds of the Glyco headquarters and set fire to several vehicles that were parked there. Back in the 80s, it was rare for the Japanese police to be stumped on such a large-scale investigation. To give you a rough idea of how on the ball the Japanese cops were, just 1 year prior to this, in 1983, the annual statistics for Japan showed that 97.1% of all murders were solved. That's impressive. The other 2.9% that were unsolved was because of a wee lassie crawling out of folks' TV screens after receiving a phone call saying 7 days. Police could never get hold of the person responsible for that one. Things would get worse for the investigators. I mean, they were already embarrassed by this case and things were about to get worse for all involved. On the 8th of April, the press received a letter, but this would only be the first of 100 letters that would be sent by the kidnappers over the next year and a half. The first letter, which had been translated, would read, "To Japanese police fools, are you stupid? There's so many of you. What on earth are you doing? If you are real pros, try catching me. There's too much handicap, so I will give you a hint. There's no fellows in the Izaki's relatives. There's no fellows in Nishinomiya police. There's no fellows in Flood Fighting Corps. Car I used is grey. Food was bought at Dai. If you want a new info, beg for it in the newspaper. After telling you all this, you should be able to catch me. If you don't, you are tax thieves. Shall I kidnap the head director of the prefectural police? So they were basically taunting the cops by saying that it was not an inside job. They even told police the type of car that they used and where they even bought their food. Subsequent letters that were getting national attention. As such, the group garnered a lot of attention in printed media as well as news broadcasts. The public would call this Gekijo Hanzai, which translates to crime as theatre. In the letters they would give superficial clues, like what gates that they would use to get in and out of a factory, or the make and model of the typewriter that was used to create the letters. However, none of these letters or clues would help police to get any closer to them. A linguistic expert analysed the letters and determined that the person writing them was using a very distinct dialect, meaning that they were from Osaka. Although this information is crucial, it never really helped the police get any closer. After a while, the group would sign off the letters by calling themselves the Monster with 21 Faces, which was taken from a 1936 book called A Fiend with 20 Faces. The main character that the story focuses on is renowned for taunting the newspapers of his exploits, issuing challenges to authorities to capture him, and he's known for being a master of disguise, so he could literally be anyone. In September of 1984, another Japanese confection company called Morinaga became the focus of the group. They had sent a threatening letter stating that unless the company paid them $410,000, then actions would be taken against them. According to police, the food company refused to bend to the demands of these extortionists. A short time later, the newspapers would receive another letter. This one, however, was a wee bit more terrifying than the rest, with worrying complications. The new letter read, "To mothers throughout Japan, in autumn, when appetites are strong, sweets are really delicious. When you consider sweets, no matter what you say, it's Morinaga. We've added a special flavour. The flavour of potassium cyanide is a little bitter. It won't cause tooth decay, so buy the sweets for your kids. We've attached a notice on these bitter sweets that they contain the poison. We've put 20 boxes in stores from Hakata to Tokyo." The very next day, reports came flooding in of labels having been found on packs of sweets across Japan with typewritten labels on them which simply read, "Danger, cyanide." Can you even imagine how scary that would be? Especially as a parent. The idea that your kid could inadvertently buy one of these products without seeing the danger note. Around 20 packages were immediately tested and found to have contained the cyanide poison. As a strange coincidence, one of the packages was located at a store only a few yards away from the home of Katsuhisa Izaki, mind the guy that was kidnapped at the start of the story. So as you can imagine, no one was buying any products from Morinaga. I'm willing to bet the candy industry as a whole felt the repercussions of this awful stunt. Of all the packages recovered, although they were found to have contained cyanide, only one of them really had enough to kill someone. The scariest thing is, however, the next letter sent to the newspapers stated that soon they would double the amount of poisoned products that were shipped, but with an added twist. This time, they would not put warning labels on them. It was like candy roulette. The police dispatched around 40,000 cops across Japan to stake out stores and supermarkets in the hopes of getting any leads. Unfortunately, the stakeouts yielded no conclusive leads at all, and so the police continued to have egg on their faces. Then on the 7th of October that year, the police got a small lead in the form of CCTV footage from one of the stores. In one of the stores where poisoned confectionery was discovered, the police reviewed the CCTV footage of the exact shelf where it was found and saw this guy. A middle-aged man with permed dark hair. He was wearing glasses and a baseball cap and seemed to have been depositing the candy onto the shelf as opposed to buying it. Let's be realistic. It's 1984, the CCTV is barely going to be usable. See, back then, all of the store's CCTV footage was recorded onto a VHS tape. Most stores' policies was to reuse the tape every 28 days, which meant it would be reused time and time again, each time degrading the tape. So with all of this in mind, you can understand why this image wasn't the best piece of evidence. The man came to be known as Bideo no Otoko, which translates to Video Man. Sounds a bit like a retro superhero. Look out, it's Video Man. Don't forget to rewind your tapes. So due to the quality and the angle of the image, Video Man was never identified. The police were obviously still puzzled by the actions of the monster with 21 faces, but still needed something solid to go on. They decided to release evidence to the public. This evidence was voice recordings from the monster, recordings which issued ransom demands. However, what was equally creepy as it was spooky was that the voice on the recordings did not seem to be that of any criminal gang, but rather the voice of a young child making these demands. On June 28, 1984, police came close to capturing the suspected mastermind. An investigator disguised himself as an employee and followed the monster's instructions for the money exchange. As he was riding a train to the money's drop point, he noticed a suspicious man watching him. He was described as a large, well-built man wearing sunglasses and with his hair cut short and permed. He was also quoted to have eyes like those of a fox. As investigators tailed him from train to train, the fox-eyed man eventually eluded them. The police subsequently released this sketch of the fox-eyed man. In a later incident, investigators saw the fox-eyed man again accompanying the alleged monster group during another secret money exchange with House Food Corporation. Once again, he was able to elude police and avoid capture. By the time 1984 came around, it was a year after the original kidnapping of Izaki, and by that time over 30 candy companies had been harassed in similar ways by the monster with 21 faces. The police still had nothing to go on. Normally, if a large corporation or company was extorted like this back then, they would simply pay the money. But each time they did, no one would show up to collect the massive amounts of cash. They were most likely paranoid that it was a trap, and to be honest, it always was. Whenever any cash was delivered to a drop-off point, the police would be waiting. On one of these occasions, the cash was to be dropped off at a truck stop, and it was demanded that 2 Glyco employees wait for a phone call there with instructions where exactly to take the money. But instead, the cops dispatched 2 undercover officers dressed in suits to wait by the payphone. The call never came. Instead, the monster with 21 faces delivered another letter saying, "You guys thought you could fool us? Dressed up in your nice blue suits, acting like salarymen, but we could tell immediately. Your shifty eyes gave you away." It always seemed like the monster with 21 faces was one step ahead of the police. In August of 1985, so about a year and a half after the initial kidnapping, they would send their last letter. At this point, the police had received over 28,000 potential tips and used over 130,000 police officers. It got so bad that only days after the monster's final letter, the police superintendent took his own life. So let's get a wee look at some theories. One theory is that it could have been an inside job, and that the original kidnapped guy, Izaki, was actually in on it. The main reason for this theory is because the public found it hard to believe that Izaki was able to escape his captors so easily. They also found it strange that whilst his company Glyco's products were threatened to be poisoned, the candy from Morinaga actually was, although there was never any evidence to back up this story. Another theory is that it was a group formed due to a vendetta against the food companies. See, back in 1955, Morinaga was producing dry milk, which at the time was used to feed babies. Within the stabilising agent used in the milk, it was discovered that it accidentally contained a form of arsenic poison, which sadly killed over 138 infants across Japan. The main issue with this theory is that the monster with 21 faces targeted several food companies, and not just Morinaga. The third theory is, Tokyo Metropolitan Police at first identified Manabu Miyazaki, the son of a known Yakuza boss and criminal himself, as the fox-eyed man and the video man, because of his resemblance to these suspects. Miyazaki had also been involved with a labour dispute with Glyco about 10 years prior. However, after his alibis were checked, he was cleared of the Glyco Morinaga crimes, though some still suspect that he could have been involved with the group. It's been a long time since these crimes were committed, and the Japanese statute of limitations are long past, but still no one has ever came forward to claim credit for these crimes. So until someone does, it will remain as an unsolved case. That's it for today, folks. Thanks ever so much for taking the time to watch this video and hang out with me today. Please stay safe out there, and as always, keep smiling.